Hi, everybody. It is Sunday, October 19th, 2025. This is the Winter Sauce Podcast, and this is a tutorial segment. I normally do these last. However, the last video for this podcast will be about one of the newer releases, which is still being manufactured. And I'm going to wait to do that one until we have a release date. And if that is not next weekend, then there won't be one next weekend. So that's that. We're getting down to the end of the year. However, before we get to the tutorial video, I am going to just cover a couple basic odds and things. Changes to our shipping policies aside, from what it stands for, we will probably not have order processing or delivery where we take it to the post office on Sundays anymore, or for about a month or 2 months or so. And this is actually due to the Democrats' government shutdown for those No Kings protests or whatever. Which there were no protesters here where I live. They normally pay to bus people in, and they didn't even have that. They didn't even have enough people to pay to bus there to go to all the cities in Wisconsin. Like, I looked at a list because it leaked or somewhere, and the news had it, and it was like towns that had even less people than where I live. And it's like, okay, you're not gonna have a protest here. And so they couldn't get enough people to show up to bus them everywhere. And even the one guy that goes and protests outside City Hall whenever they tell him to, even he didn't show up. So but because the government is shut down the contract postal service that we were taking all those to on Sunday, it was bought and they can't finish the paperwork to move it over to the new owners. They have to close it for about a month or so. So there is that, and this video or this podcast will likely be the last full one for the year. If I do one in December, it's going to depend on if we're open or not, and I still am determining if we're going to close for the entire month. Anyway, this tutorial segment, we are going to talk about the magical industry of physical media Deadstock. And this is going to kind of piggyback off the Dead End release video a little bit. And the reason I'm doing this now is there is another video thing I want to do a video on that I'm still waiting on. I'm not going to even say what it is because I don't want to jinx it, so we actually can get our energy out of that process, and then we're going to call that good. But once a year, and it kind of depends on the weather here when I actually do this, I will basically take a carload of stuff related to Winter Solace that doesn't sell or is never going to sell, or stuff that we've acquired, to the city landfill for disposal. And do it as a business deduction and call it good. That's where that photo came from of me having to destroy 450 copies of some of the early Thuljugan and Rache releases because they ended up being unable to be sold due to their content. Which, again, that's why we got out of that, and that's what became of all of the Granis cassette covers and all that stuff. This is the time of year when I go and I basically do that, and I'm planning on doing that this coming Friday. And that's kind of what got me wanting to do this video, because before, when I posted online that, hey, about once a year, we just start throwing releases and stuff away, everybody's like, oh, don't do that, that's horrible, why would you do that, that's so dumb. And while some of that is black metal just being at the mentality permanently, willingly of a toddler, and that just being the norm of people who get so preoccupied with reactions on the internet that they develop a split personality entirely and can't even function. And then you get on web forums and it just gets worse. This is when you remove that, there's still a level of black metal that's just stuck at the level of a toddler, where stuff just does not make sense. And this is, the most of that is from that level because they never let me explain why we do this. But, okay, so we stopped doing that because everyone complained. And then I was just putting the stuff in bulk lots on eBay, which we still do. However, this year there was far less of them because we hadn't been doing trades and stuff where we would go and do trades with people for nobody to buy the products, for there to be no promotion, and then just have to dispose of it anyway. And even to further exacerbate this concept of how dumb this is, and I'm going to be doing another video on this at some point, there are labels out there that will come up to me and go, well, we're going to do a partial wholesale purchase if you do a trade with us. And I even had one of the tape releases that we did done that way, where they basically come and bribe you to get you to do something. Like some guy, one of the cassettes we did, I forgot which one it was. I don't remember the name offhand. And then the band split up, of course, but he traded me a bunch of really old SOL CDs, Spiro Longinus CDs, that were really rare that he could have sold for a ton of money. He traded them to me for me to sell them for a ton of money to do his release. Yeah. Of course, this is back when I was copying tapes by hand. And not surprisingly, the band went nowhere. The whole thing was a dead end, and then he just started ghosting us when we were paying him to do logos. Okay, that's the logic that's out there. Anyway, it is 20 degrees warmer in here than it is outside. Anyway. Now, as I said, this picky... So anyway, we did that. I cycled through all of that, and I have found vendors that buy them. And we used to do this a lot more with Deadstock, and we had vendors that would purchase them. Okay, and then the one guy was buying, like, all of this. Like, all of our Deadstock. Large numbers of Deadstock. That you would never sell, and he was storing them at a warehouse in a South American country that was engulfed by fire. And because his business model was not viable, he did not resume operations. But there are people out there that buy Deadstock. And that's why this is on the magical, fantastic industry of black metal Deadstock. And we're going to just take a half hour or so or whatever and just go into detail about the concept. Okay. Now, there is tens of thousands of euros out there that is vested up in the upkeep and the logistics of Deadstock. I don't know why anybody needs to see my garbage can. Okay. And anybody who is watching this that has ever worked in a warehouse, trucking company, or any type of logistics profession would be the ones who would be able to confirm whether or not I am insane. Okay? Because if you have worked a job like that, which I have, briefly, you will determine, anybody who works in logistics, that it's expensive. There's a lot more money in it than you would realize. And it never just kind of stops. You will still have to show up, or be able to show up, at 3 o'clock in the morning, because some dumbass somewhere needs a new alternator for his car, and doesn't want to fucking wait until the shop's open to go deal with that, because then he can't go buy more meth. Logistics, it never stops, and it's expensive. And to further, they took it down off their website after people kind of realized this was a thing, but GZ Media in Prague, where most of the world's records are manufactured, bought a warehouse, and if you talk to your sales guy there, they will allow for you to, for a fee, store all of the extra shit that you pay them to press that no one buys until you determine that you have enough space to collect it. That's what they do. And I'm going to leave that silence in there so people understand what I'm putting down. In these podcasts, it's just the truth. Just a fire truth. Just straight fire. Not making crap up. He believes me, but we're not making this shit up. And major labels, or large commercial labels, or mass, not underground labels, just get truckloads of their releases, dump them at stores or online boutiques, including one of that's your favorite DVD mail order, or Blu-ray, collectible Blu-ray mail order. It sells a lot of those horror movies and stuff. You get those little lifestyle shops or whatever where you can buy, limited to 1,000 glass splatter LPs of spoken word Edgar Allan Poe podcasts and crap. Crap like that for people who buy shit like that, who need crap like that to complete their useless, meaningful lives. Okay, nobody buys any of that, and all of that's done on consignment. So some guy goes and presses thousands of something, and they just park the truckloads at these consignment places, and then they just do it on consignment. So they're only paid if anything is sold. And then, years go by, and somebody somewhere goes, I'm sick of tripping over this. OSHA's going to come in here and shut us down. You need to take shit back. And they go, well, that costs too much. We're not paying the import fees for anything like that. You can just sell it on liquidation. And we don't care about it anymore. We don't give a fuck at all. We have tens of thousands of dollars to just press whatever we want and put it on the radio and ads and all of this stuff. And nobody's going to buy it even still. But we're going to press it anyway. Because somebody paid us to. And then when it's all said and done, we're just going to not even care about it. And then if anybody complains or has a problem, we're just going to go back to whoever paid us to press all that. Whatever band that got you go, you didn't get your foot in the door, you're not making enough money, and we're just gonna take all our cut back, and you just owe us more money. Because we're the corporate record industry. And that's what we do. We just take the money. I mean, there's that. That happens. And so they had to find somewhere to dump it. And it just gets parked in a store somewhere. Dumped somewhere. Like, I'm going to look into doing this. Okay, there's a type of account you can get where your products can be sold and fulfilled by Amazon.com. And then I just dump it in their distribution center somewhere. And you actually get better foreign shipping prices. Because somebody can order that through Amazon and buy it from, say, Amazon.de in Germany with their fucking toilet paper and whatever other useless crap you buy from Jeff Bezos with that, all bundled, with Prime, where AI knows that you're going to order it and has your order packed and out the door before you even buy it, because it studies your buying habits, and that's just Minority Report. But when you scale down a little bit, okay, to black metal, or, the level of that, there are labels that would be considered underground that have a compound or a facility they operate out of. And the amount of money that they paid for that, for their logistics warehousing space, is about $1 million. So you have that, okay? And that you're going to have to get a mortgage for something like that. And you just further get into debt and owing banks money and all this, everything else. And then by the time it all settles down, and the only reasonable thing to explain it is, well, we got all this crap that no one buys. And I don't want to say crap music. I just refer to crap as a finished product, because the music on all of that could be fantastic. And somebody put a lot of time and heart into it, but it's still just a black hole. If you factor in how much it costs to store all of that, eventually you get to a point where there are products that You could keep paying to store it indefinitely for somebody out there to just go, oh, well, yeah, I buy it because I'm a giant metal nerd and I gotta own everything. You could do that and hope that happens. You know, get my single-sided 7-inch. Alright, but that realistically is not... It's not a viable solution. So for those of us who operate and live in reality, you have the problem of Deadstock. And you as a band, and if there's anybody listening to this that's playing in bands, you don't want this for your releases. Because there are certain things that, because it's consistently available, the assumption can be made that it's not any good. And it just gets dismissed, and you usually find this a lot with releases where the bands just couldn't be concerned with promoting it or putting it out there or knowing that it exists. Well, we only do black metal for our shows. And we just make it, and then we're going to get somebody to go pay a bunch of money to put it out there, and then we don't care what happens to it. We're just going to sit on Facebook and YouTube and do whatever we want and type in all capital letters and just be a nutcase because you live in the Balkans. Okay, you get that. But anyway, for those of us who live in reality, you get confronted with all this excess stock. And yes, there are people who will buy it and go and try to redistribute it and promote it. And that may eventually get that to reach people. But then you get to the logical end point of this process where you have to simply discard the stock. And you usually find that with releases that are either black holes or dead ends. And I know the previous video that I did was about dead end releases, and I'm not going to summarize or revisit the nature and the points of that other than to state that it's just something that's a dead end. And then you get to releases that are black holes, which it's going to cost you more at that point to store it, and it's better to just cut off the diseased limb and just limp away. Which I've had to do many, many times. And you go, well, how does it... What determines the decision to press all this stuff? And all this surplus stock? Okay. And this is going to kind of get into pressing quantities and stuff. Generally speaking, and I also covered this previously in the Dead End release video, or to some extent, but I'm going to just kind of flesh it out in a little greater detail. Most labels lose money on some of their releases, and just about every label has the one or two things that they do that are going to really, really sell, that attract people that do not collect physical media 24/7, 8 days a week, and buy everything and know everybody and just spend their lives amassing a pile of physical media that can't even fit in their living dwelling, and then they rent, not everybody does that. And then you get others where the only audience for that are people who collect more, consume more, and then you even get further into down the pyramid where you get the releases that basically only sell in 100 or much, much less, that are only purchased by diehard collectors. And those are that honestly is the best music that's out there, because where it only makes sense to you. Like, I'll occasionally see somebody post something somewhere that, oh, I know this obscure band only makes sense to me. I'm the one who find it. They're really attached to it, and the band is probably really good, but it just doesn't have whatever it needs to have to make the proper impact to really give it that long-term longevity. And at some point, you get to a point like I've gotten to where it's like, okay, we've done enough releases like that where we can spot them and go, hey, this isn't really the best use of resources. We're going to send you on your way to some other company, and we can just support you through distro. Because we've had a couple of those. We're getting more of those. So that we can go, and then I can in turn go and do projects that match our resource level and my desire to press larger quantities. So you just kind of get into, well, how much do you really need? There's like 3 tiers. There's the first tier where it's super, super well known. You can consistently keep it in circulation. People consistently buy it. And it just consists, it can be unlimited. And usually when people come to buy that stuff, then they may occasionally buy other lesser known things that they want or that are interesting to them. But usually the type of consumers that buy those are people who do not consistently purchase all of this, or black metal may not necessarily be their main genre of music that they listen to and are actively involved in. Okay, so that's like the first, that's like the top tier. And in my opinion, if you're a band, that is where you would want your music to eventually be. And in order to do that, you have to have the proper amount of talent and put in like decades worth of work to really build something. Which is what every band should, strive to do, so that your work and your art, lives on in some form. So there's that, and then there is other bands that you could press probably around 300 to 500 of that strive someday to be that, may have talent, are extremely underrated, but may not just have all the tools or the ability to dedicate whatever is needed to take them to that next level. And I've released a lot of those. I've met a lot of bands like that they just either can't get their foot in the door somewhere, can't get the right type of traction, or don't have located in places where the resources aren't great. Like, I'm not going to say where this guy is, but we have one guy that we do work with that what was determined was the main thing impeding the growth of his music was the equipment that it was recorded on. And when he looked at, either obtaining better gear or what he had to do with all of that, one of the things he ran into was the means and the resources to obtain that stuff did not even exist in his country. And because he can't go to a studio, he's got to pay to renovate his entire house to just be able to record a demo, to determine if he even has the talent or not to take that to the next level. That's the type of stuff, and those are the things that are modestly circulated. And many of those are traded, and unfortunately, a lot of those things become the type of releases that are just soullessly circulated. Nobody listens to these products, and they're not actively consumed. Like, larger labels larger than mine, labels larger than labels above mine, get a space, a compound, or an area to store everything, and then all of this stock is just circulated amongst themselves, and it sells off maybe 1 or 2 copies through the years if the band is active and long-running. The bands think they're getting a great deal because they're on some major label that can press a lot, but they don't realize that it's just sitting somewhere and stored indefinitely. And then the third tier of this is the things where you press 100 or less of, and these are usually either demo quality productions, releases that, like now, if somebody comes to me and we can't learn anything about them or understand enough of who they are to do a deal or something, we're only going to press that, and then we'll come back later and redo it if everything checks out and there's a legitimate demand. But most of these move 100 or less. That is the reality about how much you will sell of these or distribute. And those numbers can fluctuate a bit if people sell at concerts or run distros and trade a lot, but basically, how many copies do you need, and how long do you want this to be relevant? Because there's certain CDs we put out where we press enough of it to last a lifetime, and then it's done. And then there's other ones that we do 100 of, and those are written off. And this is before you factor in pre-production expenses. which can also determine or alter how many you need to press. Like if we buy a cover, we have to pay somebody else to do the layouts. We have to pay for mastering. All of that adds up. And then you look at, well, how much can you make off of that? And you may not make that back if you press 100, so you have to increase the quantity that you press. And that then eventually is what leads to these black hole releases, where to even get it to materialize, more money has to be spent than you ever hope of making. And that just circulates back to what I'm going to be taking to the landfill next Friday. And everyone can, think about what they will, but a lot of the reason that people get into this mess is that everything is so oversaturated and that there's no connections to all of that don't exist, and then the stuff just sits there, and then you get plenty of releases that just get forgotten by time and are never discovered until decades later. And then somebody somewhere wonders what could have been. So there's that. And that's just a rough gestalt of the magical, fantastic industry of Deadstock and all of this stuff that just circulates for years and no one buys. And this notion of this stuff selling really quickly is just a joke. Because the whole point of it is they want to sell out of it before you realize that it's always going to be circulating. So that's that. www.wintersolaceproductions.com. I want to thank everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.